Hey everyone, welcome to the Self Leadership Podcast. We believe that self leadership is all about living life as intentionally as possible in a way that feels most fulfilling. So, if that is something that you are interested in and aspiring towards, then this is the place for you. We interview great minds to find out all about their practices towards a more intentional life. Today we are joined by Aditya Bhardwaj. Addy brings a unique vantage point to self-leadership. He's taking the thinking that has served him so well in solving technology problems and applies it to life as a whole. So please join us for what promises to be a super exciting conversation.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Self Leadership Podcast. Today Anna and I are joined by Addy, a colleague of ours who you would have heard a little bit more about in today's introduction. So before we jump into it, Addy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Nice to meet you guys again.
Awesome. Well, we're very, very excited to have you here today. And so for those of you listeners who haven't had the pleasure yet of meeting you, could you give them a brief introduction to yourself?
Sure. So I'm Aditya Bhardwaj. Most people call me Addy. I currently, in terms of work, I am head of SaaS engineering in Temenos. I've been in financial services industry for some time. So I've worked with JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs as a senior architect. I've also had my rodeo in the startup. I was CTO at Tomato Pay, where we all got to know each other and we worked together. I prefer myself to be referred as a technologist. I really like this field since I was a kid, got really pulled into the world of technology. It was a curiosity that pulled me in, and since then it's just been a journey for me. Amazing. So very high level for me, that's me.
Amazing. I want to just zoom in on the term of technologist because we're going to come on to another term very shortly. So for those of our listeners who don't know, how would you describe a technologist and what was it about that kind of terminology that you associate with?
That's an interesting question because to me, technology was around curiosity. When I see something, I want to go really to the basics and figure out, okay, why does it work the way it works? I mean, I refer to it as grounds up thinking, like really pull something apart, put it back in together, and then figure out the mechanics behind things to say, okay, this is working because of X. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is all about software or like IT. But it's really the way I like to view things, what's behind what goes on. And that's what pulls me towards it. But I think for some reason, it's the machines right now. Whereas we're moving towards the AI world, it's becoming more of, hey, actually, how does it actually work that AI is learning to use by itself as well? So it's just the mechanics behind things that I refer to as technology.
And Addy, may I ask, if we move away from software and machines for a moment, where else would you say do you have a strong curiosity to find out how things work?
I think this one is interesting because, like, for a large part of my life, it was just around the machines and like getting that feedback, which was very instantaneous. As I was growing up, especially in the career, I started observing people as well. I was not social in that sense, but now I'm in a slightly bigger world where there are different forces. I think at one point I was explaining to somebody that after like observing people and their behaviors, this is another one of my curiosity is really breaking down like behaviors to say, hey, what motivates somebody to behave in a certain way? Mm-hmm. And then right now it's more of like when I see lots of people behaving in a certain way, I imagine it as forces that are pulling and pushing and creating a situation. So I think getting into that state to say, okay, like actually like as a human being, like, what are your motivations and what might be leading to that? I'll go a little from technology standpoint, like systems engineering. Like if you have one like small system and there are many systems, when they come together, they behave in a certain different way always. Systems are a reflection of humans in some ways. Because I learned these things from the system point of view, I'm trying to now apply it on like the ecosystem that I'm operating in as well. So when you observe to say, hey, how different human beings react, and when you see them operating together and you can almost imagine the forces that is causing a situation, then it becomes in some ways you can start to predict what might happen or what kind of input that you might want to give to get a different outcome that you might want to bring out. But I think humans are way more complicated than machines, I would say. For sure.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, I want to ask you another follow-up question, but I'm going to put a pause on that until I've asked you the next question, which is around the idea of self-leadership. And you've just given an explanation of the term technologist, and what we've learned so far from this series is that actually everyone's got a different definition for self-leadership as well. So before we get into your actual habits and practices, what does self-leadership mean to you?
The way I like to put it is leading your life with curiosity, I would probably say, with a child in you, right? Why do I say with a child in you is because at the end of the day, like the way I would like to measure where I'm going, it's about your journey in life. So where you're going, do you feel happy at the end of it? Do you feel content at the end of it? If you see a child after a day's play or fights or whatever, when they sleep, they have this peacefulness on their face. And I think for me, like if I have to term self-leadership is where I would like to take, I wouldn't say like that's everybody else's definition. But for me, it's being in that state of mind that yes, you can do all the good things and not so good things, but at the end of the day, can you have that smile on your face just like a child and really move on? Because at the end of the day, your life is your own. You have to chalk it out. You cannot predict it. So you'll have to take it as it comes. So are you curious enough? Are you observant enough? Are you trying to then making sure that you're calibrating at the end of the day to say, okay, this happened. Are you content with it? Have you accepted it or not? And can you go into the next day and do something else or do the same thing? The outcome for me is, can I sit back at the end of the day and have that smile just like a child? That would be how I would like to live my life, at least.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Addy. And I noticed that you mentioned curiosity a few times. And I mean, I personally am also a huge fan of curiosity and the power it holds. I would like to ask you the following. What is it about curiosity that puts it front and center for you when you think about self-leadership and when you think about that childlike smile of contentment at the end of the day?
I think that's a very good question. I think curiosity is perhaps the thing that leads you towards the feeling at the end of the journey or that micro journey where you say, I can do this as well. For example, I'm pretty sure everybody has these moments where they're curious about something, they figure out, they observe, they look at it and say, hey, how does that work? And they don't know. And it's during that process, you're starting to learn about something absolutely new. You're possibly breaking it down in your own way. Let me just take an example. I think it's my dad. He used to be very frustrated because every time he got me a toy, I would basically open it up and then look what's inside. And then I say, okay. So, and most of the toys that I used to get would have some kind of motor inside. So I'll take out the motor and say, there's a motor inside this, and there's a motor inside this as well. And I used to go towards the magnet to say, hey, what's this magnet doing? Sometimes I would be able to put it back. Sometimes, obviously, you can't always put it back. But at the end of it, you start to learn like exactly the thing that you're using. How does it actually work? So what you're really going after is that learning and the feeling after you learn something new, where you can actually say, now I know something more, right? You may not always know like where you're going to apply it, but you have that feeling to say, now I know something more. Like now I can do something more as well. So I think that's the route for curiosity for me, is have I learned something more than what I had learned yesterday. So that's the root of curiosity for me.
Mm. So is it then fair to say that the thing that's most likely to draw the childlike smile on your face at the end of a day is you having learned something new?
Yep. Yep. I want to distinguish success versus failures as well, right? So it may not always be that you successfully learned something. It might be that you've done something absolutely stupid. And then you have learned that there are consequences. So So let's say, like, you might have got into a fight, right?
Mm.
And at the end of the fight, you have learned that that experience was not pleasant. But if you've taken that in and say, okay, now I know what happens when I do this, and that experience was not pleasant, that's something new itself. So I think it's just that curiosity might take you in directions. It may not necessarily be some learning a new topic. It might be maybe associated with a failure to say, or doing something you should not do. But have you learned that you should not do that? And now you can move on.
I think all three of us have had experience in the startup world, so I feel like embracing failure is a lesson that we've all had to learn the hard way at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I remember one of the things that we used to discuss during Tomato Pay is we have learned probably, if we are absolutely successful, we'll probably learn like handful of things on what to do, right? But when you don't become absolutely successful, you'll probably learn hundreds of things that you shouldn't do as compared to if you had been successful. So just in that moment, you're learning just way too many things.
Understood.
If we bring this back to self-leadership for a moment, Addy, what I'm hearing you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that ultimately self-leadership for you is about curiosity, is about learning, is about like learning new things, new concepts, the way things work, getting new information, and at the same time also learning, hey, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, what do I want to keep doing, what do I want to stop doing. So it's ultimately not just knowledge acquisition, but it's also getting the knowledge of what kind of life do I want to lead and how and why. Is that a fair summary?
I think the last part I would probably say I don't think I have any clue on what kind of life I want to lead, right? So I think and the reason I said like leading like a child with a child in you is because if you look at the child, they have no idea, right? They have no idea. They just take it as it comes. Because I don't think you can actually predict what your journey is going to be. But if you just keep on exploring and like things will just come that you cannot guess. So I think it's curiosity because you're curious for learning more and more, right? There's no end to learning. Learning is unlimited. So the question is, are you curious enough for things that are coming at you? And you can figure out which direction definitely to pick and which directions you may not want to pick. I personally don't tend to think this is where I need to go. But I think it's, for me, it's, okay, let's just do something new.
Love it. Well, let's dive into the 5 practices that enable you to live that inner child. I'm excited and curious now myself to hear what these are going to be. So in no particular order, Addy, let's start with practice number 1. Could you share it with us, please?
Sure, absolutely. So this one I would call breaking away from local maxima. So it's a term that you use, especially when you do algo writing. When you're writing a complex algorithm, the problem space is vast, right? And you have to like constantly pick and figure out which solution that you're picking and experimenting with, and is it better than the previous one? And sometimes you end up in like a local maxima, which looks like the best option amongst the poor options. But actually, what you don't know is there's another option that's way, way bigger, and you're not able to reach it because every time you travel down and say, oh, no, like this was better. So you go back up to that local maxima, almost like a small peak. And you're sitting on a peak. Every time you go left, you go down. Every time you go right, you go down. Then you think that, hey, that peak is the peak. So you tend to get stuck to say, hey, no, I shouldn't go down because there's a fear of going down, right? Whereas what you don't know is if you go down, there will be another peak that you can climb, which is way bigger, right? So that is one of the practice I do follow is breaking away from the local maxima by doing something which is completely unrelated. I'm pretty sure everybody has this thing where they're trying to solve a problem. And if you keep on thinking about the problem, you won't find the solution, or you'll find a solution which is not optimal. What I tend to do is do something completely unrelated. So go out for a walk, go cook, go do gardening or do a swim. Just consume yourself with something which is completely unrelated, which wipes your mental state of those biases that you might have created, and then come back to the problem. When you come back to the problem, it's quite likely that you might just find the next route to the solution. So that's one thing I tend to find, like I refer to it as breaking away from the local maxima, because you have to break away from that situation completely, come out of the situation, and then come back in. Because when you come back in, you might enter at a completely different place. And from that point, when you try to find what the next solution is, you may not be stuck in this zone where you're constantly going up and down, thinking this is the best solution. Pick anything, but you have to wipe your mental state clean and then try again.
Mm. And Addy, could you give us an example of when you've used this recently? What was it for, and how did it work out for you?
Can I use a very old example? Back in my university days, I was working on a problem with a professor. The challenge was it was an exponentially growing network. So every time you grow the network to the next level, it'll go to the power another, right? So it would just go 2 to the power 10, 11, 12, we reached 22. And at 22, I was at the peak of the computer I had at that point in time. And it just maxed out, we couldn't go any further. And at that moment, we're just circling around the same thing to say, hey, this is it, we should stop. I could see that even he didn't know exactly what to do. He said something very strange. He said some problems are computational, some problems are not computational. And I'm not sure whether he knew what he wanted to convey. I was hearing something which I couldn't comprehend as well. And I just took a break. I just took a break, and I just I went back to my room and just started looking at the fan. I'm just complete wipe myself out. And while I was in that state, I found a mathematical solution to that problem, which was computational. And we could go as big as we wanted to go at that point, right? So if I was trying to just solve it computationally at that point, there will always be a computational limit, because we're trying to simulate something in a way where you have to really build the entire network and all those things. What we came out with was a very simple mathematical formula using the nature of that network itself. Nobody had thought about it for so many years. I think the reason it came is simply because we detach ourselves and say, okay, we have reached the peak and this is where we are. Now we're taking a step back, and I don't know what's going to come next. And then it just appears. I really cherish those moments where you just don't know why you got a solution. It wasn't because you're thinking. Let's put it this way. It wasn't because you're sitting around thinking really, really hard. It's because you step away and it just appears. Another anecdote I use at home as well, my wife gets really frustrated sometimes when we can't see anything. When me and my son, we're asking, hey, have you seen this? And she's like, it's right in front of you. So I'm sure a lot of people can connect with that as well. So I have a rule, when you're trying to look for something and you can't, turn around and look behind you. The reason I came up with that is there's a philosophy in when you're in a maze, it's designed with the solution behind you. That's why you can't get out of it, right? But just to close, the behavior is turn around and you might find the solution. If you don't, turn around again because it might have been in front of you. Either you're in a maze or you're so used to your biases that you can't see it and it's right in front of you, right? So by turning around, you break away from it. And when you turn back, you come with a fresh pair of eyes.
I guess it's an act of bravery at this point, right? Because at that time, it feels counterintuitive. If you take the work example that you've used, it feels counterintuitive to stop if you can't figure out a problem. Your natural energy is to keep going. And so actually by removing yourself from the situation, it's hard, right? There would be some resistance there, I assume. So how do you train to or practice to overcome that?
If you start cooking, for example, right, you cannot cook while you're thinking about a problem at work. You have to focus on chopping the vegetables properly, figuring out the proportions. You have so much aroma in the room. It will naturally just take you away because you're making something else. So that's basically where or if you're going out for a walk, right? Let's say you're going for a hike, right? You'll see so many different things that will take you have to consciously let yourself relax as well, right? And I'm not going down the path of meditation, right? Like I personally haven't practiced enough to say much about it, but some people who can, they will just go meditate perhaps, right? For me, it's if I just go out around the nature, there's so many stimulus. So if you just observe the stimulus, it will just take you away from the problem. If you sit in your garden and watch a squirrel go by or a bird like hop around, it'll take you away. Just focus on them and just say it's amazing. Like nature is amazing itself. There's so many things. What we are creating is so finite and what's outside is infinite. So can you just let yourself melt away into the infinite? And then come back to the finite, because you still have to solve the problem. You still have to learn.
Let yourself melt away into the infinite. That's so beautiful.
Love it. Well, let's leave the first practice there and move on to practice number 2, as the first one was so interesting. Addy, please share practice number 2 with us.
So practice number 2, I would say, is share your crazy ideas. I've noticed this one, to be honest, I think between people who are doing startup versus people who don't do startup, and just between the two worlds. And it's not like that binary, to be honest, but like it's general. I think when you go into a room of entrepreneurs, they will all talk about their ideas, right? They're not afraid. Whereas if you go into a room of people who have been in corporate world, they're very cagey about their ideas. They don't share. So there are two different worlds. What I've discovered is when you share your idea, I almost imagine it as there's a stream of knowledge that is infinite. That stream of knowledge flows through you. If you block that stream of knowledge, it'll stop flowing through you. At a very simple level, the moment you share, you are going to get a response back as well. The only caveat I will add here is I've also found that you have to share it with the right set of people. And if I have to apply the stream theory in that sense to say, hey, the stream that's flowing is coming through you because you allowed it to stream through you. And that's where my hypothesis is, when you have the aha moment, is because that stream just passes through you. Like you've not figured it out, you've let it pass through you. So if you let it pass through a person who will let it pass through as well, you'll get more. But if you let it pass through a person who's not receptive and doesn't want to, it will stop with you as well. And you'll probably feel that there are people that you love to discuss ideas and you learn and you get really excited. And there are people, when you discuss ideas, they will just almost block your thinking, right? So you have to choose wisely. But I think generally, share your ideas. It doesn't matter. It's just infinite. Because in the moment of your sharing your idea, you will learn something new. I'll give one recent example, right? So I met up with a colleague of mine recently, and we are trying to figure out how does the world look like in future with the whole AI and kind of thing going on. And we all focused on like how the coding is becoming so automated with AI. And I'm working on kind of the strategy as part of my organization. And it's like, that's not code. And I really wanted to write that down using AI as well, get challenged through AI as well. And we were sitting there and we said, well, what's code? And we say, well, code is logic, right? Like, yeah. And we say, yeah, it's logic. And say, well, isn't the strategy logical? And it's like, yeah. So I'm like, if strategy is logical and code is also logic, everything has to be logical. So if everything is logical, and they say, well, we use this thing called large language model. It's a language model. If language model can deal with logic, why can't it deal with strategy? So as we continue to talk, we suddenly realize that, hey, there's a different way of looking at the future of the world. When I was thinking on my own, I was just reaching a point to say, hey, I want to do X, but I didn't know why. But now when you constantly start to spitball and you say, hey, just throw some words to say, hey, is it not this? And the other person also thinks in a different way. You're letting the flow of knowledge through you and through that person. and then you discover something and say, of course, like it is obvious when you find it. So I think that is my next practice, is just share your ideas, let the knowledge flow through you.
So beautiful. I love this one. And, it really reminds me of a concept that is so key to coaching, actually, which is that you can do your best thinking only when you've got somebody really receptive across from you, somebody who can do deep listening, really engage with what you're saying, and then meet you where you are. Like that is shown, like scientifically shown, to bring people to much better ideas, much better breakthroughs, and it applies across the board, right? Whether you're solving complex technical problems or complex personal problems, creating that space between two people where things can emerge is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's that alignment is so important, because if I apply the flow theory as like, if it doesn't connect and doesn't flow,
Yeah.
then it's not going to work. So the alignment has to be there, and the knowledge is streaming past you at a certain pace, and the other person is not able to consume it at that pace. Then you need to think, maybe there are more people that you need to talk to. Because the stream of ideas and the stream of knowledge that's flowing through you is going at a particular pace. Can you recognize that, and can you do something about it?
And tell me, Addy, how do you tend to find out who the right people are for any given topic? Obviously with some you already have experience and hey, this person is great for this kind of conversation. However, sometimes you will also want to bring this to somebody new, perhaps. And I guess my question is, how do you go about that first time sharing and finding the right balance between sharing enough to really give this a proper try, but not sharing too much in case the person's not receptive, because that can then leave you or the person sharing feeling a bit, maybe upset is too strong a word, but when you're sharing something personal, something vulnerable, something that you care about, and it just falls flat, that can be a difficult experience. So how do you find the right balance?
I think I'm still trying to work that one out. So, but let's put it this way. I think the moment you start sharing, you will find out. So start with the sharing, and then recognize the nature of things. So it's not that the other person is not the right person. That person might be the closest person to you, but they may not be in a state where they can receive and they can propagate. Right? So I tend to share very openly, end up blabbering to lots of people. It's relatively easy to identify who they are, because you will lose track of time, because you keep on snowballing. The only frustration is sometimes that the time will go by and you'll feel, hey, but we haven't done anything. So if you let it flow, it just keeps on flowing. So you have to be mindful of that, perhaps, but can certainly distinguish, because you'll lose track of time. Like, you can sit down with those people for a couple of hours and you won't even know.
It's interesting because whilst this concept that you've described there, I heard as you're describing it, which is I have this idea and I need to share it, and there's value in the feedback. And that absolutely makes total sense, and it has obviously strengthened itself. I've heard it like building on that almost with the first practice, that actually you can apply this to problem solving as well. And I was listening to what you said, and actually, like, I use this a lot for trying to problem solve, which is like often like I'm the blocker because I can't get it out. And actually, like 9 times out of 10, the biggest difference maker in solving a problem that I have in day-to-day life is just getting it out. And I think a lot of the issues that I have, and I feel like listeners would probably resonate to this as well, is I try to solve the problem in my head, and then it feels harder than it is. It takes up more headspace. I have less computational room to fix it, and actually just getting it out and releasing that blocker from yourself then gives you more headspace back to be able to solve it. Or you realize actually it's not as difficult as I thought this was. It just feels a lot. And so yes, I can see like value in sharing ideas with other people. Actually, from a problem solving perspective, I think there's a lot of value of getting out of the way of your own stream and just getting these things out, whether that be journaling, automated writing Anna's taught me about before. Like, there's ways of removing these obstacles and letting your own stream flow, to use your analogy. So it's not a question as such, but like this is what I was thinking about when I was listening to you, and I think actually it's
Yes.
like a super helpful piece of advice.
You reminded me that I think writing is another one, because I would say I don't write that much, but what I find is when there is so much urge that I feel that I have to write it down, and by writing it down, it settles my mind as well. When I mean by writing it down, almost publicly, right? Like put a blog out. When you're writing it publicly, I don't journal that way, because when you put it out to the world, right, you're propagating that as well. You're not keeping it in your journal, because if you keep, like, I find that like I used to write notes, but I never went back to it. So in some ways, writing down will materialize in your mind, like what you know, but it's not still flowing. So what I found is conversations can be quite bouncy, like you can just bounce around, but you may not logically think and conclude. But when you want to write it down, you will make sure that it kind of makes sense to a lot of unknown people, because now it's public. And you have to make an argument so that a lot of people can understand it at that moment in time. And what I notice is when I do that, it settles my mind on that particular topic for some time. So I can move on. I think it allows me to move on to the next level of thinking. So I think I would couple it with let it flow, but like if sometimes if you're stuck again and you're constantly going in circles, you might want to just write it down and just share it with everybody, because at that moment, lots of other points might come. But then because you've written it down, you might start thinking about the next thing, like step 2, step 3, perhaps.
Well, let's take inspiration from that. I feel like you vocalizing this is your form of writing this down. So let's move on to the next level of thinking and move on to practice number 3 whenever you're ready.
Yep. So practice number 3, I'm pretty sure like everybody has this, but I like to have this vault of experiences, memories, for example, right? Like I wouldn't say the nice one or the bad one, but like just memories. As you go through experiences, you would be doing lots of new things. For me, curiosity is at the core, right? I also then remember those things to say, hey, like I managed to do this. And those things are things that I've never done before. So that goes into almost like a memory box that if I want to just open up in the moment where I'm not sure, or I have, say, doubt of, can I do this? Then you open your memory box and you can actually look at it and say, hey, surely you've done something like this crazy before. Might not be exactly the same, but how many crazy things have you done? It might be absolutely. And I think the reason I would say it's not just about successes, it's about you would have done something so terrible, but survived, right? Just remembering that making a mistake does not mean that everything will come falling apart. Right. So when you have those memories to say, hey, yeah, I've done mistakes before. So like, should I be afraid of mistakes? If you remember those moments to say, yeah, doing mistakes was okay, you might be willing to take more challenges. Right. So, and especially when you have done something before, it might be like as a kid, you looked up the hill and say, hey, oh, that looks quite far, but you managed to climb up. You would know that moment, how you felt, and you will remember the moment when you finished it. So every time when you're in the moment where you just don't know whether you can do it, if you open that memory box and say, I've been in this situation before, because the feelings are almost very similar. Feeling of fear, anxiety, like you can pull those memories back and say, I was in this situation, but I did do it. So why not now? The only caveat I'll say is obviously like there are extreme cases where you shouldn't do, because there's no coming back from those situations, right? So I think my grandpa used to say, go experiment, do everything that you want to do. Just be aware that there is certain red lines that if you cross, you can't come back. So as long as you are aware of those red lines, go experiment, go play. So I think I would say like that's one practice I do is have a memory box, because every time you're not sure, you can open it. And to be honest, when you're procrastinating, let's say you're sitting down, and it will bring smile to your face, because that is who you are, right? Those are your experiences. It's I would say it's not the things that you accumulated. It's not the physical thing that you accumulated. These are the memories you accumulated. Nobody can take it away from you.
Yeah. No, it's really powerful what you're sharing. Going back to the memory box and using that as proof points that you've done things successfully before, or you have tried to do them before and dared do them before. And I really like what you said about it not being so much about, was the past experience very similar to the current experience? It's much more about the feeling. Did the past experience make me feel similarly to how I feel now? Like I really love that link. I wanted to ask you, Addy, when does this technique come in most useful for you? Is it when you're about to make an important decision? Is it when you are procrastinating about something? Is it when you're not sure what to do next? Like, what are the specific situations where you're finding this most useful?
I think the most useful for me is when you want to do something that you're not sure, right?
Hmm.
You're not sure because you're afraid, or you're not sure because it's not something you've done before.
Hmm.
Right. I'll give you an example. It's not a crazy one. Like, this one is very, very normal one. Is I think I was in JP, and I was JP Morgan, and my manager came and said, "Hey, can you look into this data space?" And I was like, I'm not the guy who spent his time looking at data. Like, there are so many people who are more qualified than me, and they understand the space. They've been in this space for decades, right? It's like, why me? And I say, well, because there's nobody else at the moment in the group that they could tap in. I'm like, okay, fine. At that moment, I said, well, have I done something where there's a lot of people who have done it, but like, I'm entering for the first time? Sure, yeah. Like, joining Tomato Pay as CTO, I've never done it before, but it turned out to be okay. It wasn't terrible. Like, we didn't like do crazy stuff, or crazy bad stuff. Looking back in my past, like changing careers, like going from consulting unrelated to finance, and then just suddenly becoming somebody who really understands and has a voice, where like becoming almost like architect, entering that space very, very new, and just suddenly becoming an architect because you manage to understand the basics, right? So when you look back and say, yes, I have done it before, so why not? And then you go I went into the space, and then just start sharing. Like, here's my crazy idea. Like, nobody's talking about those things in data space the way I wanted to do it. I was like, I want to do something different. I'm like, I know how people are doing it, but I don't know, like, something is not sitting right. So I start sharing ideas. And then, like, knowledge just keeps on coming to you. People keep on sharing their experiences. And then you start to build a completely new way of looking at it. And then, as we are looking at a very different way of building things, one of our partners from AWS, they say, Addy, do you know, like, this is the new thing that is starting to take place in the industry? I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't realize this. I mean, and it's like, yeah, okay, like, we've done something like this before. So take the first steps. Don't worry about being like, obviously this is being used quite a bit. Like, don't worry about being successful or not. Just go in, just do it. Like, you don't know what you're going to discover, and when you discover it, you'll enjoy it. To say, another one for the memory box. So I think it does help, because it helps take that decision to say, yeah, why not? Is I would say is I think that is the next question I ask when something just comes. Why should I not? If you have a doubt, then you look at the memory box and say, sure, I've done some crazy stuff. Why not?
It sounds super freeing. That's how I've interpreted it. And again, I'm going to try and be the devil's advocate to bring this back to like day-to-day life and outside of work. But like, I used this
Okay.
yesterday with my son.
Yeah.
He had like quite an important football game, and he's quite young, and he's worrying about the game. And the concept that I said to him was like, you don't know what's going to happen in the game. There's no way of knowing what's going to happen in the game. So you have to go and play the game and
Yeah.
trust that whatever happens in that hour, you can deal with, right? So you've made some mistakes. It's not gone so well. and you're still here and you had the courage to go again. You've had some games where you were amazing and you're still here to do the same. So all you can take into the game is that whatever happens, you're going to be fine. And in that sense, it's quite freeing to remove that kind of heaviness and doubt or whatever it may be in work or outside of work from yourself is liberating, I would say.
Yeah, and I think what I feel is you tend to operate quite better when you don't have this expectation to say, "Hey, what will happen if I don't succeed?" I mean, what is success at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Right. So, I think I keep on asking that question. Of like, somebody says, "Hey, like, what is success?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, for me, it's just do.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
do
nice.
what's coming at you, and we'll see. At the end of the day, when you go from this world, like, you're not going to take any of the things that people call success. So, but when you're old, you'll still have the memory box. It'll still bring smile to your face. Will it bring smile to your face by saying I was a CEO or CTO of a company? I don't know. I think what will bring smile at your face is what you actually did when you were there.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more. And that's it's helpful for someone like me, a recovering perfectionist, to hear this, because it's often the scariest thing is to do something because you could do it wrong, you could do it not good enough, you could not live up to your own expectations of what's good enough. So to just do and view that as success, it feels almost radical. And at the same time, yeah, freeing is also the word that comes to mind. If success is redefined not as doing something really, really well or up to some standard or whatever, but it's just about doing it, then all of a sudden you've got nothing to lose and you'll probably end up doing a lot more and doing it a lot better than if you're sitting there fretting about will it be good enough. So yes, my inner perfectionist has been calmed a bit. Thank you, Addy.
Always keep the imperfect memories in the books, because it reminds you that those can happen, but it won't still matter.
Yeah.
Your inner saboteur, as you taught me once, Anna.
Yes.
Number 5. No,
Number
4.
4.
Number 4.
Yeah,
I'm getting ahead of
4.
ourselves.
Wow.
Number
I'm
4.
not sure whether I'll have 5, but this one is a little, maybe perhaps a little bit more serious. So I would preface it is like, from time to time, you will typically be in a very tough situation. There would be a lot of pressure. You might be extremely angry, or let's just say it's a very, very tough situation. I'm not going to be sharing lots of examples here, or let's see. The one thing I think in those moments is, what is that one thing that matters the most? When you're in that situation, and you might be even willing to throw everything away or be extremely stressed out, the question that I tend to ask at that moment is, what is that one thing which is not about you, but one thing that matters the most? And if you can hold on to that one thing and let that storm past, I think so far it's worked for me. I think that one thing which is not like you, perhaps, but more external, something or somebody outside, like who's not you. And then you can say, okay, as long as I secured that, everything else can fall apart, but this should not be impacted. On a lighter note, what is the MVP? The smallest thing that you can think that matters the most. Every other thing can be cut down in scope, but you want to secure just one thing. So I think that's one practice I've learned recently. I would say I might lose all my money, I might lose everything else, but just this thing I will want to secure. And that allows you to navigate like a tough situation, and then like everything becomes okay, and you look back and you say, oh, actually nothing was going to happen anyways, perhaps, but if you look at the possibilities, there are lots of things that can really, really go wrong. But sorry, I won't be sharing any examples.
That's quite all right. But what I do want to ask about is, how do you go about figuring out what that one thing is?
I think it depends from time to time. It depends on the situation as well. So when you're in those tough situations and you can go do something really extreme, let's say you're on a good career and you want to throw it all away. Perhaps think about something which is more around your responsibility and your duty. If you can anchor yourself to say, hey, this is my duty, it's non-negotiable. Let's say you're at work and it's a completely toxic situation and your finances are extremely poor, but you have a child at home that you need to take care of, right? In that moment, like you would basically say, okay, I'll move out. Like I need to save myself or do X, Y, and Z. But if in that moment your single most important duty is to secure the child, because that's your duty, then what you'll find is you will be able to deal with everything else. You'll find a situation out of the toxic situation as well, because you'll realize what is that one thing that matters to you the most. Or you might just say, hey, I need to secure this. And then you'll work backwards to say, okay, what is the minimum I need to secure this? Right? And you might find that, hey, actually going to a different job, which may not be your ideal job, will secure that situation. You'll probably move out of the toxic situation into another, say you might take a pay cut, right? But you may move to a job which gives you enough to secure that one thing.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to think about that one thing, which is your duty. And that is something that I will not let anything touch. So it could be a child, it could be something else, it could be parents, it could be your partner. I can't say I have like massive amount of experience in this space, but like every time I have been in this situation, like I tend to figure out what matters the most. And then find that one thing and let that guide your decisions.
I guess I'm wondering whether it really always is a duty. That's the one thing. Say somebody doesn't have children, doesn't have a partner, there's no duties in relation to their parents, for instance. And then the most important thing to preserve might be health or mental health or whatever you want to call it. And I guess the question is that then, is that still a duty?
Yeah, I think, sorry, I lost the last bit, but let's take another example perhaps. You are at a very comfortable situation in a company, but let's say there are things that are happening which are non-ethical, right? And if one thing that you want to anchor yourself to say that if I allow this to happen or be part of it, it changes my character, right? And if that is the thing that you want to hold closest to you and say, this, what matters the most, that something that will stay with me in my memory box, and it is not going to bring a smile to my face. So at that moment, that is the one thing that you'll hold on to, and you'll let everything else go. If that is cushy job with lots of money, you'll let it go. So I think that's, I would say, like, it doesn't need to be a sense of duty in terms of another human being, but it might be a sense of duty towards you. Are you going to allow yourself to change just because somebody is throwing some money at you, or you're just at the peak of some career, or I don't know. So I think I know this one is a little heavy, but I would say just identify what matters the most and then figure out, let it guide you.
Yeah, it's the first part of that summary for me that hits is the task or the exercise that you're describing really counts on the fact that you as a person know what your North Star or North Stars are in those moments, right? And it talks to the value of knowing who you're trying to be or what you want to achieve or what you're trying to do. Is that gives you then the proxy to make the decision in the first place. And I think if someone's coming into those situations and they don't know what their North Star is, then it could get really tricky because you're trying to do the two things at once. But if you know health is my goal, and so therefore that's got to be my choice, or chasing these new experiences, as you said in the last answer, is my North Star, then that makes the decision easier. But it's really speaking to the power of knowing your your vision. That's how I've heard it.
Yeah, so Josh, I would probably say like in most cases you won't know. Like in these situations, like even I didn't know. But when you're in the situation, what you might know is there's something making you uncomfortable, right? And that's why you're trying to identify is like, what shall I do? Because you're uncomfortable. And that's where I ask that one question.
Right.
What matters the most? That question allows you to identify what matters the most because you don't know.
Got you.
Right? And you might have like 10 options on the table to say what matters the most. This matters, this matters, this matters. I'm like, if you have to choose one thing, absolutely one thing, right? Not two things, just one thing.
One, yeah.
What is that one thing you're gonna pick? And I believe, I think in Tomato Bay, we did use that, not in this context, but when we are at the choice to say, hey, we have to go live in like 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, what do we do? Let's pick one thing. It works, right? That's why there are a lot of parallel concepts of pick one thing, top priority. What's that one priority? And then you cut everything else out and you just focus on the one thing, and it allows you to focus on just that one thing.
Understood.
So you won't know. You actually won't know. But asking that question will help you identify what that one thing is.
Got you.
The more times you find yourself in these situations where you're being forced to ask yourself, the more clarity you will gain eventually on what your North Stars are and what your values are, right? Like if you see that in these challenging situations over and over and over again, you end up prioritizing your child and your health and I don't know, whatever else, right? It starts giving you a North Star in a very kind of organic, bottom-up way, which is really cool.
I like it. I like it. Well, let's move on to our final practice because I'm conscious of time.
All right.
So, practice number 5, Addy, if you may. What is it?
I'll make it a lighter one.
They're all good.
So this is a little bit of a silliness at play, right? So when you're stuck, I try to find a punchline or words and punchlines because I think it allows you to do a little bit of lateral thinking in that situation. When you don't know, like describe the same thing in different ways. Like I was saying earlier, we're looking at AI and say, hey, what does code mean? Code means logic. Okay, logic is an interesting word. Code and a strategy will not join. But when you extract logic from code and then logic from strategy, they say, oh, hang on a second, actually is the same thing. Sometimes punchlines, I just keep on like describing things just as a wordplay sometimes. And it just takes you away from the situation into a slightly, say, a parallel dimension of thinking, because you might be thinking maybe for a different setup. Right. For example, when I was explaining earlier, hey, for me, I'm starting to think about organizations as like physics. Like there are different like pressure points. Like there's a situation sitting in the middle. Everybody is applying certain kind of force, and that situation is going to gravitate towards something. Or if you can just imagine the forces as like physical things, then you can figure out how to deal with that situation. I try to use like punchlines or keywords, extractions. So that helps me just to do a bit of lateral thinking and helps me get out of the situation or come with a new idea as well. So
I love the playfulness and the creativity of it. And say, Addy, I want to give that a try over the coming days. How do I start? What do I do?
speak to somebody. Play with somebody. You can't play by yourself, like easily. It's much easier to just sit down with somebody and just play because they also want to play.
Say I'm stuck somewhere, right? Like I've got a problem or a situation, and then you say, okay, play with somebody, talk to somebody. So I call my best friend and I say, look, I've got this problem or this situation. And then what?
Maybe use something like, isn't this like something else? Draw a parallel. Because when you draw a parallel, it's quite likely you're trying to meet in the middle with the other person who doesn't really understand the situation. So you're kind of detached. See, when you're in a situation, you are very biased towards that situation. right? Because you know too much, the other person doesn't know too much. Now, the moment you draw a parallel, you've created a hypothetical situation. You can't know enough because you're not in that situation. And the other person can connect with you because it's a middle ground where the parity is less with that situation. They can imagine as well as you can imagine, and you can then pull back some of the learning when you do some experimentation by thinking about a parallel. If you explain your situation and the other person says, have you tried this? And say, I don't know what you're thinking. Like, you don't understand, right? You'll say, oh, you don't understand. Like, let me explain. You keep on explaining, the other person is frustrated because obviously you know everything. But it's like, if you know everything, why don't you solve your own problem, right? But when you draw a parallel with your situation, you don't know everything. Now, this is a hypothetical situation that you've created, which is parallel to your real situation. And then you say, hey, here's a punchline or maybe something like this. And you're ideating at that point with another person. They can contribute equally because you don't know too much. Because you just invented that situation yourself, right? And the other person can come and invent with you. You can take their knowledge and their experience and their thoughts into your situation. You can bridge because you are the bridge between this hypothetical situation and your situation. And you are allowing the other person to actually contribute.
Super interesting. I've never thought about it that way, but it makes a lot of sense actually. And it has the benefit of both like creating a bit of space between you and your situation, right? And looking at it more objectively, but also perhaps you end up getting less defensive when your sparring partner comes up with
Yes.
solutions, suggestions, and so on, because it feels less personal as well. And you're really problem solving together, like 100% together. Very cool. I shall give that a try.
Yeah, I like this one as well. It allows the problem to be the problem, not all the emotion, right? Like it kind of reduces everything else away to just leave you what you started with, which is the point.
Yes.
And I really
Absolutely.
like it.
No, that's very aptly put. I think it's it takes the emotions out.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
It creates empathy, like it creates a grounding, an equal grounding for both people to be on. I really like it. I'm just trying to think of all the situations I could use it now. There's quite a lot. I would definitely give that one a try. Awesome. Okay, so that concludes our 5 practices. They've been super, super interesting. Addy, could you do me and our listeners a very quick favor and just recap them as quickly as you can?
This is the tough part because I don't always remember what I say.
Just the headline, just the practice itself.
But because I wrote some of these down, I'll replay. So the first one is breaking away from the local maxima by stepping away into doing something completely different. Wash your brain out of that situation and come fresh, right? Second one, share your crazy ideas because it's a stream of knowledge. Knowledge is unlimited. If you don't let it flow, you will not get anything new, right? So you let it flow just like a stream. The third one is hold your memories, your experiences in a vault, in a memory box, because it will help you. It'll bring a smile to your face. Fourth one, when you're in a tough situation, find what matters the most. Hold on to just one thing, let it guide you. And the last one is if you use indirection as a way to solve problems, find punchlines, find parallel threads, so you can think with another person and enjoy solving that problem.
Amazing. Addy, this is a great reminder for me personally of why we started this podcast in the first place, because today we've had a conversation and you've brought to the table 5 practices that, as a self-described technologist, you use in situations around technology. I think all of the 5 situations that you've described today, you've been able to articulate with examples of how you use it to solve technology driven problems. And yet Anna and I, and hopefully our listeners too, have been able to listen to these, and actually they're equally as applicable in our self-leadership journeys in a completely different space, but they are equally as applicable. And I think it's one of the reasons that I wanted to start this podcast. I get a lot of energy for it. So I really appreciate you sharing those 5 practices with us today. I'm sure our listeners have enjoyed them all. If you have, please make sure to hit subscribe so that you can get next episode as well, where hopefully you'll get something equally as impactful from our next guest. But for now, Addy, this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time and thank you for your openness today.
Thank you so much, Addy.
It's a pleasure being on this podcast. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.